Well, you join us today at Reepham Fisheries, one of my favourite venues, and we're going to be talking you through some winter tips as the weather gets colder and how to get the most out of your fishing. When it comes to fishing this time of year, it is paramount that you give yourselves a few options. The one thing that I would not do this time of year is pile in loads of bait into one area and just hope it works. Some days it might do, but I promise you if you do that, more days than not, you're going to put yourself in trouble, certainly as it gets colder. So plan your session, think about it a little bit and just give yourselves two options. So we'll concentrate on the short pole today, but what I'm going to do is on my left-hand side, I'm going to fish it really negative. So I'm going to have a toss spot on the end of a pole, really small amount of bait, a light rig, and I'm just going to feel my way in. That might be the fact that I might catch there all day. They might not want a lot of bait, but I've got the option there to be relatively negative. And then to my right, I'm going to be slightly more positive. That bait is going to be thrown. It's going to try and create some interest into the swim, try and draw some fish in, and just get some bait falling through the water. So both of those are very contrasting styles. One's going to be relatively aggressive and one's going to be very negative. But certainly as it gets colder and throughout the year, the more options you have, the more chance you've got of getting it right on the day. Looking at the rigs themselves, it's no different for me any time of the year. I like to keep them as simple as I possibly can. All I've done is I've married it up to the style of fishing that I mentioned earlier. So the light rig first, we start off with a really small toss spot. A minute bit of bait's going to be put in through this, but it's ultra accurate. So for this particular style, it's very important. Elastic wise, it's Matrix Slick Orange. Now it's quite light for potentially the size of the fish that are in here. But that's because I've lightened down on my line strength of the rig. Because this is so negative, this is the one that I want to get bites on. I want to feel my way in, and we need to make sure that we're fishing effectively enough for that to happen. So the main line is 013, and that then comes down to a relatively light, slim-bodied wire stem float. Now, if I'm ever fishing and trying to work out what's in my swim, I will always use that style of float. For me, it lets you read the bites easier. And certainly, if they're really finicky, that will show up. That comes down to a really simple strung out number 8 is a bulk, and then hook link is 011, so even lighter, and a size 18 hook. So as I mentioned, it is quite light, but this is all about putting weight in your net, this rig, and this is the one that hopefully we can move on to the heavier one after we've used that. So this is going to be fished on the line that I'm throwing the pellets. The elastic's been upped, the pot's been removed. We've now got a solid 14 and the main line is 017. The float itself is also a lot bigger. This is actually a ½ gram float and it's not actually that deep, so it's quite a heavy float for the depth of water, but this is much more positive. I'm throwing bait at it, I'm going to be lifting and dropping throughout the water column, and I just want a nice stable float that I know if it goes under, it's definitely going to be a bite. Shotting wise, I want to get it down, so I've got a bulk with 2 droppers, again all shotted in number 8s, and hook link is 015, size 16 hook, and we've got a small little bait band on there because hopefully we're going to be banding hard pellets. So nothing particularly scientific, nothing special with the rigs, but certainly think about how you're feeding, how you're trying to catch and what you're trying to catch, and marry your rig up to that situation. Bait wise for the session is probably the 2 most productive baits on commercial fishing for as long as I can remember, and probably will be as long as I remember, and that is maggots and pellets. So on a negative line with toss spotting in, I've chosen today to actually just use maggots. I'm probably going to put in 10 or 15 per cast, And if you wanted to, if the situation was a lot of silvers, you could use micro pellet there. It would just be as good. But for today, that's not going to be an issue. That's just maggots on that line. The other one, everyone loves a pellet. It's just 4mm pellets. The one thing I would say, this comes from my carp fishing, if you ever watched a fish pick up a hard bait, they sometimes do spin it and eject it quite quick, and then they just find it easier to actually get involved and digest softer bait. So the 4mm pellets are soaked in water, they take all of that in, and that also, very important, allows me to add some flavour. So whatever flavour you like. For me personally, Hinder's Tutti Fruiti's gone on today. I like a real sort of fruity bait for the winter. So not only have I got a soft bait now, I've also got one with extra attractant in it. And that's what I'm throwing over the top of that rig, and hopefully is the one that's going to produce the big weight when you get it right. One of the big things to think about, certainly the colder it gets, the more this comes into play, is how these fish are actually feeding. They're not now charging around, pushing each other out the way, burying their heads in silt to try and get to the bait. They're really now being selective about how they feed. So I've already mentioned that my bait is adapted to that in softening it down. But the biggest thing I would say is to, so you can see exactly what's going on, is to shot your float and dot the bristle down to absolutely as low as you can physically see. There is so many situations where you've got a big bristle sticking out, a fish has come along, it's picked your hook bait up, and because it's so slow and it's not moving, you really aren't seeing it. So a big thing this time of year is absolutely imperative to dot your float down and hit every single bite. The last thing to think about and take in consideration is just take your time once you've finally put the hard work in and you've got a fish on. I see so many people rush it, but you've got to remember, with lighting down on the rigs, the hooks are smaller and everything is just generally softer. And when it is really cold, you might only get 3 or 4 opportunities. So it is so important to make those opportunities count and make sure that fish gets in your net. Well, what a way to end an unbelievable session. The temperatures might be dropping, the leaves might be falling off the trees, but putting those tips into practice today has kept bites coming literally all day long.